The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
This is your captain speaking. We are beginning our descent into madness.
Open your mind.
And we are back to another edition of West of the Rockies. I'm Frank. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know it's late, but like I said, we got a really, really cool show lined up for everyone tonight. Genevieve, how you doing over there?
I'm doing quite all right. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I want to thank everybody that's tuning in tonight. I appreciate the support, and I want to thank everybody who's been signing up to the YouTube channel. We have just posted a really, really cool interview with Todd Newman, who was the director of Dave Navarro's documentary, Morning Sun. Mm-hmm. And man, if you haven't seen that documentary, definitely check it out. It's really intense. One of the best documentaries I've seen in a very long time. I'm super proud of those guys. And, the interview with Todd was quite interesting, insightful, and funny. A lot of laugh out loud moments there. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go check it out. Tonight, we have another special guest, somebody I'm very excited to have on. We heard about him, I believe it was like at this Halloween store. Our good friend Ernie Alonso from Haunted Orange County took us to this Halloween store. That was the first time I heard about his book, and obviously we got a chance to meet him there briefly. And it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, Los Angeles is such a huge city, and tons of bizarre things happen in this metropolis. And there's one section of town that is commonly known as East Los Angeles. He has written a book where he has compiled some very interesting accounts of paranormal activity that has occurred in East Los Angeles. And some of the places that he covers are Evergreen Cemetery. We'll talk about that tonight. Stevenson Middle School. This street where Richard Ramirez was apprehended, and some very, very crazy stuff has happened there shortly after, his arrest on this particular street. And we're going to talk about that one tonight. And of course, one place that I'm quite familiar with, Linda Vista Hospital, another place that was notorious.
Plenty of stories there.
Exactly. So I'm really excited to have Mario Becerra as our guest tonight. I'm going to bring him into the conversation. Mario, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine. How are you, Frank and Genevieve?
We're doing good.
Yeah,
we're really happy that you could be with us tonight to talk about this book, man, because I tell you, I was sitting the other day reading this book, and Genevieve walked into the room, and I literally jumped like 5 feet in the air because I was you just had me so terrified reading some of this stuff. How did you begin to compile this? I mean, are you a native of East Los Angeles? Are these kind of stories that you grew up listening to, or did you go out, looking for people that had experienced some weird stuff?
No, good evening to everybody. And I did grow up in East LA. I grew up there. I lived there for 24 years. And I moved to Whittier. I live in Whittier now, but then, I have a cousin named Victor. He's a great guy, and he's always been into the paranormal. Still lives in East LA. And he started visiting me and started telling me all these stories about East LA and all these hauntings that occur in all these different locations, Evergreen, and all this, all the sensational things he had heard. And, over pizza and, some, a couple of beers, we started talking, and we decided, hey, let's, why don't you bring me the stories, and we'll compile them into a book and just tell these stories and have a lot of fun, listening to all these stories, especially the stories that, you hear these stories growing up, and all we did was organize it into a short book, and, put it out for the public to judge and to read.
You had me at pizza and beers, which is coincidentally is my favorite method of investigating the paranormal as well. But no, that's really interesting because obviously there is a high concentration of the Mexican American community in East Los Angeles, and as the culture is, right, scary stories are part of the fabric of the Latino culture. You know?
Oh yeah.
I visited Mexico in a couple of occasions, and every time I'm down there, you know, there is no shortage of people who are willing to share some of their crazy paranormal stories that happen. And, you know, honestly, you can tell by the level of sincerity that these people have experienced something. What was your process for picking the accounts that you include in your book? Because as you can imagine, I also encounter with my fair share of stories where I am not 100% certain that it can be attributed 100% to a paranormal occurrence.
Right. Well, what we did is Victor, you know, he'd go out and he'd investigate. He'd talk to people. The stories we chose, by and large, are stories that could be corroborated by more than one source. So, for example, the Evergreen Cemetery one, the one with the lady that allegedly walks through the cemetery, that was corroborated by a lot of independent sources. So although we heard a lot of great stories, we tried as much as we could to use those that we could reasonably say, you know, the evidence is very strong here that, you know, something is going on here and it needs to be looked further into. So that's pretty much how we determine what stories would go into the book.
Okay, so why don't we get into it, because you just mentioned Evergreen Cemetery, and to be honest, prior to reading your book, I didn't know about Evergreen Cemetery, so why don't you give me a little bit of background or a little bit of history on this particular cemetery? What's the story?
Well, Evergreen Cemetery, it was founded in 1877. It was founded under the condition that a potter's field be included in the construction of the cemetery. And for those of you that don't know, a potter's field is an area where the unknown, unclaimed corpses are buried. So in 1924, the potter's field, all the people that would die on the street that were unknown, they would get buried in the corner of Evergreen Cemetery. And, you know, in 1924, the potter's field became so saturated that the county constructed a crematorium to burn the substantial number of incoming corpses. Evergreen Cemetery is if I'm not mistaken, the oldest cemetery in Los Angeles. And it was the first cemetery to allow African Americans to be buried in the cemetery. And the beautiful thing about it is that you go now and you can see people of all backgrounds at the cemetery. So it's very, very indicative of the people that have been in Los Angeles and you know, the amount of immigrants and the amount of people that continue to come from all over the world to Los Angeles. So that's a little bit of the history of it.
Now, in your book, you know, I was reading and I just saw the name Bond, and I was like, wow, they got James Bond on the case. No, but there's a Captain Bond that you mentioned in your book, and apparently he was one of the first ones to have been sent out. He was, I believe, a police officer, right? He was a captain in the police force. And it sounds like he was tasked to investigate the strange sounds and things that people were hearing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what he found? Because I thought that was a bit funny.
Well, in 1926, people kept hearing things in the middle of the night coming from the cemetery. They'd hear shrieks, they'd hear laughter. And if you're walking by a cemetery and it's the middle of the night and you hear, you know, noises coming from the cemetery, naturally it's gonna scare you. You're gonna wonder what the heck is going on in there. Mm-hmm. So people kept on hearing these what they describe as unearthly shrieks and laughter coming from the cemetery. So finally they told the police, hey, we keep hearing stuff in the cemetery. So this Captain Bond, he went out and he investigated, and what they found was not of supernatural or paranormal origin. It was, in fact, they had this was during Prohibition, and they had they had a bar. Right? You know, the superintendent there was running a bar.
Wow.
So what they were hearing were people essentially in there having a great time during Prohibition, drinking and dancing and doing whatever they were doing, and that's what people thought it was paranormal. It was actually more related to the joys of alcohol than anything. So that was a great story and a good part of the history of the cemetery.
A few interesting things have happened in this cemetery. Among them, there's an interesting story about some kids that were, I guess you can say they were up to no good one night out there in the cemetery. And apparently, something very strange happened to them. Why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit about that story?
Well, I need to tell the folks that some of the names were changed in the book. So although I'm saying the names, people told me these stories sometimes on condition that I change the name. So it was a gentleman named Gabriel, quote, Gabriel.
Right.
And his friends Hector and Carlos. They decided to break into Evergreen Cemetery because they essentially just wanted a nice, quiet place to drink. So, they jumped the fence and they took in some vodka and, they started drinking. They started drinking heavily. And, when they started feeling the effects, they started doing a lot of stupid things with the tombstones. Things that, I don't know. When you go to a cemetery, I don't know the etiquette exactly, but I know I have enough sense not to step on any of the tombs because I don't know where I learned that from, but I just don't do that stuff.
Of course.
Well, these kids, they were drinking and they started messing around with the tombstones. They started doing, things that were, teenage boys, kind of sexual in nature,
Right.
gyrating and doing things. And all of a sudden, out of all this disrespect and essentially dishonor of these tombstones, they see about 50 yards from them a dwarf running from one tree to another. So in their alcoholic stupor, they stopped, they told me, and they said they see this little dwarf just running from one tree to another, and they stopped in their tracks. They stopped what they were doing. And they said, we didn't know what the heck to do. I mean, he kept on running from one tree to another and then getting closer and closer to them. And then they wanted to run, but they said that they were frozen. They couldn't move. It was the fight or flight. And, they were like deers in the headlights. Well, finally, this dwarf, they lost track of him. And then he just basically stood right in front of them. And when they saw him, he had the head of a goat. And he was only like 3 feet tall. And at that point, when they saw the goat head, that's when I guess their instincts kicked in and they ran for the fences and they got the heck out of there. So that was the story with those kids that were in there drinking.
Honestly, the description that they give is like, I think he was wearing like a vest and like genie type pants or something like that. And it's funny because it reminds me of elves, and throughout history, you hear these stories about elves and these little human-like beings. It's funny. I'll share a story with you. Talk about visiting Mexico. I remember this lady sharing a story with me. Apparently at night, she had to be on her guard because she claimed that these little elves would come at night and try to take her kids away. And it's funny because this type of story I've heard quite a bit from people in Mexico and Latin America about these little elves or dwarfs. So for me, it was really strange to hear of such a story that's so similar happening, just a few miles from downtown LA. I mean, it's quite strange, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, when you hear a story like that, a 3-foot dwarf in genie pants with the head of a goat, I mean, come on.
It's like, I'll have what they're having, but...
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I smelled them, make sure they weren't drinking, but no, they were sincere. They were absolutely sincere. And, I thought it was sensational when I heard it.
Yeah.
But then, you go online and you research and... No, in the world of the paranormal, it's not a sensational story. People have seen things that are way more sensational than that, and that's why I decided to include it, because these guys, I felt they were sincere about their story, and that's why I decided, you know what, I'm going to put it in the book, because that's a great story.
Hey, it's a great story, and believe it or not, I think that was the exact story I was reading when Genevieve walked into the door.
Oh boy.
I was in the middle, like my mind was literally like picturing this like elf with a goat's head. But anyways, no, it's a fascinating story. Now, in that same cemetery, people have claimed to have seen another type of apparition or entity, which to me, it almost, again, going back to like Latin American folklore, it reminds me of La Llorona or the Weeping Woman. There's an aspect of it that's very similar to that. Why don't you tell me a little bit about this mysterious woman that people have reported seeing, I would say walking through the cemetery, but I think the correct word would be floating through the cemetery.
Absolutely. Yeah, people have and I've heard this story ever since I was a little boy, and Victor had too, and many people I knew have heard this story. So, it's essentially the story of a woman who, you're walking, on the street by the cemetery, and you're minding your own business. You're on your way somewhere, and then all of a sudden your eye turns to the cemetery, and you look, and there's a woman in white. I don't know why ghosts always wear white, but they're always in white. But there's a woman in white, and she's walking or floating very slowly across the cemetery. And you see her, and then all of a sudden she disappears. And people have described it as it almost seems like there's a projector in the ground projecting her, and then the projector turns off.
Oh, wow.
And then it goes dark. Everything goes dark. And as you're thinking, what the heck did I just see? You just hear a howl after that. Maybe a few seconds later. And people say after they hear that howl, that's when they beat it, and they just run and they get the heck out of there. Like the guys that were drinking vodka and they jumped the fence. So, and the great thing about that story, and I talked about corroboration earlier, is we spoke to a lady, because we put this stuff on Facebook, and the lady who was very, older lady who grew up in East LA, right by Evergreen Cemetery, a Jewish lady, she contacted me and she said, that woman that you mentioned, I saw her when I was a teenager, which, to me further proved the story of the woman who walks in the cemetery late at night. So, there you go. That's probably the most famous story that comes out of Evergreen Cemetery.
And it's this story that was the inspiration for the artwork in your book, correct? There's a very beautiful, I really don't know if it's a pencil type sketch.
I think it's ink.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about who the artist is and why did you choose that to be the cover of your book?
Her name is Gloria Negrete. Very, very talented artist. I bought a lot of her art, and it's on the walls of my home and of my office. Beautiful artist. I've always felt a kinship with her because her art, it always spoke to me. It wasn't just that it was great, but I always looked at it and always felt something, and I couldn't quite put it into words. So when I started writing the book, she was the only artist I thought about. With regard to doing the cover art for the book. So I called her up. I said, Gloria, I'm writing this book about haunted East LA, and she's from East LA too. She's a longtime resident. And she said, oh yeah, well tell me about it. And I said, well, it's blah, 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 and this and that. And she says, why don't you send me some of the stories, and then from that, I'll get inspired and draw what I think belongs on the cover. And I said, that sounds great to me, because I trust her, and I trust her instincts. So I said, go for it. Here are the stories. Pick one, and then just go for it. Just whatever inspires you. I didn't want to micromanage her in any way. And she did. She went one afternoon to Evergreen Cemetery with her sketchbook, and, the cover art that she produced, it floored me. It's just so gorgeous. And I honestly think my book wouldn't be as successful without Gloria's cover art, because a lot of people look at the cover art and say, wow, what is that? Whereas if I had some rinky-dink thing on the cover, I don't think half as many people would have noticed my book. So I'm very grateful for Gloria Negrete. Her talent has been a true blessing to my book.
It's a great looking cover, I must say, and it does complement very well the content of the book. And I must agree with you that it definitely draws you in when you look at it. And needless to say, as soon as you start reading it, at least I couldn't put it down. Let's talk about one more story out of Evergreen Cemetery, because this is I like this one, and I like it because of the way you explained it to us when we got a chance to meet in person. And that is a story of Michael. And it's one of these cases where, usually when we talk about the paranormal, it has negative connotations, or at least not positive ones, right? But in this case, it seems like a paranormal experience actually helped this gentleman by the name of Michael. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what he experienced?
Absolutely. Well, we spoke to this gentleman, and again, his name is not Michael. He didn't want us to use his name, so I honored that. But, in dealing with the paranormal sometimes, I'm not sure sometimes because, people talk about things being evil or demons or this or that. But I honestly believe that it's the unknown. So even if it may be good, it's still the unknown,
right?
And it scares us. So that's why Michael's story, which is very uplifting. It's a paranormal story, but it's very uplifting. It was important for me to include his story. He had lost his wife. He was a newlywed, and he lost his wife. His wife passed away, and she, they had the service at Evergreen Cemetery. They buried her there. And, he would go visit her every day. And, after he'd visit her, he'd walk around the cemetery. It's a beautiful cemetery. You have just these gorgeous tombstones that are very elaborate, very, very, you just want to stare at it. And then all the names, from the 18th century, from the 19th century, not 18th century,
right.
19th century. All these names. It's just a gorgeous place. Well, he'd walk around and just kind of look around. And, he was contemplating suicide. He wanted to kill himself. He lost his wife and who he dearly loved. And he tells me, you know what, I wanted to end my life. So one day he visits his wife, and then he's walking around the cemetery, and he's walking by the chapel thinking of suicide. And he just hears Michael in a whisper. And he looks around and, okay, so he keeps walking, and again, Michael. And he's wondering where the voice is coming from. And finally he hears it a third time. Michael. And he told me it was the voice of my mom. And his mom had died when he was a little boy.
Wow.
And he said, when I heard the voice of my mother, I dropped to my knees and I just started crying. And he said, I hadn't cried since my wife died. And after all that crying and letting out all that grief, I finally felt like I could live. I felt like I could move on with my life. And, he returned to, the comfort of his friends. And, he was still sad, but he says, that was the turning point for me. That was my moment where I knew I could, not overcome it, because he says you never get over the
right.
death of a family member, of someone
course.
you love. But I knew I could move on, because before that, I did not want to move on. So it was a gorgeous story, because I sincerely believe that, your ancestors, they're around you, and that they protect you and they take care of you. So when I heard Michael's story, I thought it was a beautiful story, and I could really not relate to it, because I've never had something tragic like that happen to me. But, I do believe that, like I said, my ancestors, they watch over you, or they watch over me, and, everyone's ancestors who have passed away. I think that's part of our experience as human beings, and certainly Michael experienced it that day.
I remember hearing you tell the story. This was before I got a chance to read it, from the book, and it's quite unique. Every now and then you come across an account like this where somebody has there's a positive outcome out of what could potentially scare another, individual.
Yeah.
So I found that to be really interesting. So Evergreen Cemetery, definitely a very interesting and active place, paranormally speaking. Now, here's another place you cover in your book, and I'm a bit familiar with this one. I've always have said that this is the place where I turn from a skeptic to a believer in the paranormal. And I'm talking, of course, about Linda Vista Hospital. This place was, again, another notorious location. If you, pick up a movie or watch a TV show, you might see Linda Vista in there playing a background role, because it's a very popular filming location. And I've heard from people that have gone there to shoot that, some weird, crazy stuff has happened to them. them, and I have my own experiences there. But before we get into some of that stuff, Mario, why don't you tell me a little bit about Linda Vista Hospital for the people that maybe are not too familiar with it?
Well, Linda Vista is a hospital in Boyle Heights, but I included it in my book Haunted East LA because it is the most notoriously haunted location in this area. I mean, people come from all over the country to investigate it and to find out what's going on. And yeah, it has been used, not anymore because now it's kind of apartment complexes for older folks, I believe.
Correct.
But when it was an abandoned hospital, a lot of people would use it for filming and for a lot of horror stories because it absolutely lent itself to
Oh
that.
yeah, totally.
You'd look at it from the outside and it had that foreboding quality about it.
Yeah.
So, the history of Linda Vista is that it was actually a hospital for the railroad company, the Santa Fe Railroad Company, and in the 80s, it kind of fell not into disrepair, but the hospital couldn't accommodate all the emergencies, and funding fell through and all that, so it closed its doors. After servicing the community for such a long time. And after that, it kind of became a little bit of a mecca for ghost enthusiasts because, I know a lot of shows have gone there and their evidence that they have come away with is really compelling. And it's really, it's difficult to ascribe the things that they recorded on their video cameras or on their voice recorders to anything else but the unexplainable.
Yeah.
So, we interviewed a lot of the people that went, and, a lot of the stories that they told us are stories that we heard or that we have seen on television shows, which was kind of cool because that was kind of part of the corroboration that I talked about earlier, to have people that are not on TV who have investigated it, and
right.
It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of within the same realm, so that something's going on there. But when we went there, Frank, and you told me about it, and you told me that this was where you became essentially a believer in the paranormal, I was really fascinated with what you had to say, and I listened to every word that you said because this place, it's hard to put into words, and I'm actually a little bit tongue-tied because it's such an important place in the paranormal community, especially here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
If you can please share because honestly, your story is so compelling and it's a first-person account because I don't have a first-person account. So if you can please share your story, I would think the listeners would love to hear it.
Whoa, so we're turning the tables now. I see how it is.
Absolutely.
I see what's going on here, Mario. West of the Rockies with Mario Becerra joining. He'll be here next Sunday as well. No, right. Mario. Like I said, it's a place where, I definitely had to rethink my stance on the paranormal. I'll try to be as brief and concise as possible. Back in 2011, I probably had done the show just a few months, and somebody had listened to it, and they asked me, like, hey, we're having this little paranormal event. Would you like to come and talk about conspiracies? Because at the time, even though I was covering some paranormal stuff, I really didn't have a whole lot of first-hand experience, mainly because I was a bit skeptical about it. So I was like, hey, whatever, let's do it. Sounds like fun. Never heard of Linda Vista prior. I did just a quick Google search and read that apparently it was supposed to be haunted, and I'm like, okay, cool. Showed up, did my thing, and they told me that, they were having like an overnight investigation and that I was welcome to stay. I had no equipment. Obviously, nowadays, people who are familiar with paranormal investigation and some of the TV shows, there's a kit that most people have. All I had was my good buddy Jimmy. We had these flip cams. I don't know if I think they're still being sold. I just checked online, but there were these little they were called flip cams, and they record in HD, and that's really all we had. So we were literally just walking around this hospital in the dark because there was no light, and we kind of tagged along with a couple of groups that we felt like they looked like they knew what they were doing. So as we're walking around, we're just recording. And it's funny because, and I'll actually play it, we were walking around, I believe it was the third floor, And the third floor had a reputation apparently for bad stuff happening. We walked through the whole floor, and it's a very big hospital building with huge wings. And at the end of the night, I get home and I'm going through the files in this flip cam, and I'm listening to it. I knew that people have said that you can hear like voices and recordings and stuff, and I'm watching the video, and all of a sudden something really catches my attention because it was really hard to miss. And I realized that there was a spot where in the video you can see that we're just kind of like walking and we're following these two ladies. And as they're talking in the recording, I hear, I don't know, it sounds like some kind of people have described it as a growl or a groan or something along those lines that I tell you, Mario, if I had heard that in real time, everybody in that place would have run out, I think. The fact that for some reason this thing was only captured on our little digital camcorder was really interesting, to say the least. And I'm just going to cue it up here. I hope you can hear it okay, Mario, over the phone line. And I hope that the folks at home can hear it as well. Like I said, you can't miss it. You're going to hear these two ladies talking about some piece of equipment and then something very strange kind of in the background. So I'm just going to hit play and let's see if we can hear this.
Oh, somebody's got a, what is it you have on your phone? That was the iOculus? Yeah, somebody's got that. I heard it. Somebody's got it. I'm telling you.
So I don't know how many people caught that. I'm going to play it one more time, a little louder. I just kind of put a little bit of compression on it to kind of bring it up. And after, let me see if Mario was able to hear it. There.
Oh, somebody's got a, what is it you have on your phone? That was the iOculus? Yeah, somebody's got that. I heard it. Yeah, somebody's got that. I heard it. Yeah, somebody's got that. I heard it.
So there is something in the background just kind of creating a very strange, like I said, throaty type of sound.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember
I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember thinking like, okay, that was strange. Now, obviously, I don't know if that would have convinced me by itself, but what happened at the end of the night, and that was the story that I shared with you, Mario, was what was impressive, and that was the fact that we were doing an EVP session in the surgical suite in that area of the hospital, which, by all accounts, it seemed to have been one of the most active areas in this hospital, paranormally speaking, and it's funny because I was there with like 4 team members of the paranormal group that had set up their home base at Linda Vista. And, we're sitting there in the darkness when all of a sudden we began to see what looked like a laser pointer at the end of the hall. And mind you, it's pitch black. There's nobody on that side of the building. And, I started looking back thinking somebody must be down the other hall pointing with one of these laser thingies, but I couldn't see, you should be able to see the red dot from the source to the wall, and there was none of that, but somehow there was this little dot and then another dot popped up and they were dancing around. At that point, they had what they call the Frank's box or the spirit box going. And, I remember one of the girls there asked, can I say the name of somebody here? And they said Frank. And I was like, what? And, they said it like 2 or 3 times. Later, I found out that apparently one of the doctors that was killed there, I think, or something, or murder, his name was Frank as well, which I found kind of creepy. But as that was going on, picture this. We're all sitting in the dark in this abandoned hospital in a kind of like a circle almost, but we're all facing in one direction. And there were 4 girls of this paranormal group, myself and my buddy Jimmy. My buddy Jimmy was standing off to the side behind me. So as this is going on, literally probably about 6 inches away from my face, a male voice going like literally in front of my face. And I remember I grabbed one of the girls by the arm and I squeezed her and I was like, what was that? And the thing is that they were excited. They were like, they were having a blast. They were like, oh my God, this is, and this is like my first time experiencing this kind of thing. And I'm like, freaking out a bit. And all of a sudden, as we're looking down this hallway, and this was the real strange part, that on the side between, these two doorways on the wall, I began to see this swirling pattern forming. It was almost like if you take spray paint, that silver white spray paint, that's the best way I can describe it. It's like as if somebody was using one and just spraying these kind of swirls, and it was moving. And again, the girls are fascinated. They were like, oh my God, you're doing so good, thanking whatever was manifesting. And in my head, I'm thinking, what if something comes through this freaking, because it looked like a portal to me, you know what I'm So that happened. And I was asking my buddy Jimmy, I was like, are you recording this? Because he had the flip cam. He recorded this whole thing, but it was just pitch black. And, it wasn't like a night vision camera or anything like that. So unfortunately, you can't see anything, but boy, can you hear my reactions that time. And like I said, this swirling pattern went on for a few minutes until it disappeared. And afterwards, the girls, because they have been doing, paranormal investigations for a long time, they had this method of, they kind of split up and one of them went to each one to hear what they saw, just to kind of make sure that everybody saw the same thing. And it looks like everybody did see the same thing, man. And, to this day, I don't know what it was. I was fortunate enough to go back to Linda Vista on a few more occasions after that, but I never experienced anything remotely to that level of activity, to say the least. So that's my Linda Vista story. But why don't we talk about one of the Linda Vista stories in the book, because there is one that I believe also takes place in the surgical suite. And this happened to two gentlemen that go by the name of Nick and Joey in the book. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And you know what? Thanks for sharing, Frank, because, it's one thing for me to read it from the book secondhand, but to hear the first, you were there, you experienced it. It's just wonderful to hear it. So thank you so much. It's a great story, and I'm glad you put it out there.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. No. Thank you for allowing me to share it in the time that we had for you. But I'm glad it contributes something to this Linda Vista chapter. But why don't you tell me about Nick and Joey and what they experienced down there?
Sure. Well, Nick and Joey, they, the surgical suite, very active. And, what they experienced in there was that they went into the surgical suite and they started hearing a whimpering, a little girl crying. And the funny thing about it was they didn't think they were listening to anything paranormal. Literally, they thought there's a little girl in here and we need to help her. That's how clear the crying was. So, Nick and Joey, they said, you know what, man, we were like, dude, we gotta get this little girl out of here. I think she snuck in here somehow and she's stuck and she doesn't know how to get out.
Wow.
So they went around looking for a mortal little girl. And when they couldn't find her, they realized, you know what? There's no little girl here. That's just one of the paranormal occurrences that happened to us. But, the thing is, they said that when they've experienced paranormal occurrences or activity, it's not that clear. It's much more opaque. It's much more, you kind of wonder what you're hearing. Did I hear what I hear? Did I see what I see? But this was so clear, so demarcated in terms of it being a little girl that they thought they needed to help a human being. So, I mean, that story gave me a lot of goosebumps, because it's just, you hear a child crying, and as a good human being, you want to help the child get out or help a child in need. It's just in our nature, but apparently it was some kind of apparition that they heard.
It's really interesting, because that reminds me of several conversations I had with the paranormal group that investigated Linda Vista for the longest period of time, I think. And they reported hearing this little girl, and I apologize if I'm making a mistake in my retelling of the story, but I think the gist of it was that this little girl was hit by a car on the street, right in front of Linda Vista, I believe. And people have interacted with this entity that appears to be a little girl. A few months back, we had the pleasure of interviewing an amazing artist by the name of James Picard. And he was actually just recently featured in an episode of the TV show Ghost Adventures, where they investigate this place here in LA called Casa de Rosas. And it's funny because when we were interviewing him, he does this exhibit, a series of exhibits called The Dark and the Wounded. And it's it's just some fascinating artwork. The man it's a genius when he's mastered so many art mediums. It's not even funny. And he displays this particular series in some very heavy, correct, that is the word, heavy places. And one of them was Linda Vista Hospital. So he was telling us about how he was down there, I believe on the same area of the surgical suite. And he was just painting, and he says that he just found himself painting like a little girl, I believe.
Yeah, no. Well, he was saying, he usually just paints what comes to his mind, and he rarely, paints from something in front of him. He visualizes something and just goes ahead with it. And yeah, he said he was painting a little girl. He thought nothing of it. That's just what he does. He thinks of something and he paints it.
So they had sent a reporter, I can't remember from what news source, to interview him. And, he's down there painting, waiting for the reporter to arrive. And he says that the reporter never arrived. Later, he got a hold of the reporter, and the reporter said that, while she was walking down the hallway.
The fact is, she did arrive.
Yeah, she got there. She was walking down the hallway to the surgical suite where James Picard was waiting, when all of a sudden she heard the laughter of like a little girl. And she ran out. And again, I apologize, I'm paraphrasing the story, but you can listen to that interview on her website or our YouTube channel. It's really interesting. Our interview with James Picard. Point is, when we told him, he had no idea. I told him it's interesting because there are reports that a little girl was hit in front of the hospital, and that's the entity that they see. So he was floored because he says that while he was down there, he just felt compelled to paint this little girl. Lo and behold, the reporter shows up and has some kind of experience where she hears or has some interaction with what looks like a little girl, and he didn't even know that the story is that a little girl was hit by a car in front of Linda Vista. Wow. So yeah, there's a lot of since you're a fan of corroborating, there's another one, right? But
and that's what's great about it. There you go. Yeah. I mean, I've never heard that story, but the fact that can corroborate what's in the book, it makes it that much more compelling, which is wonderful. Wow, what a crazy story! So
Isn't
the
it?
Guy just painted, and he just paints from what he sees in his mind or what he's feeling, and he painted a little girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, and for the folks at home that want to check it out, go to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/WOTR Radio, or go to the website WOTRradio.com, and you'll see our interview with James Picard where we talk about that.
Just as a disclaimer, it's not a paranormal interview of any kind, but I'm of the opinion that he genuinely has some sort of
gift.
Yeah, I mean, some sort of ability, or if you want to call it sixth sense, but he's able to pick up on things, but it's nothing that he's ever said or worked on or advertised, but that's the vibe I get.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, James Picard, and again, that story was really interesting, and yeah, check it out if people want to listen to another spooky tale from Linda Vista. That's another good one. Mario, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to take a quick break and play a few tunes. Would you be so kind to hang on the line?
Absolutely. I'm having a lot of fun.
I hope so, because I wish I could say that we're having fun, but honestly, I'm sweating and I'm scared because every time, some of this stuff, I can tell that Linda Vista story a million times, but every time I tell it, it's like I'm reliving the freaking experience. But yeah, just hang on the line, and we're going to be right back in just a few minutes. We're going to go to break with this next track, which is one of my all-time favorite Jane's Addiction tracks. And, shout out to Dave and Todd. I want to, again, encourage people to check out the interview we had with Todd Newman, director of Dave's documentary, Morning Sun. That interview was a lot of fun and very insightful. And as I said in that interview, growing up, I was a big fan of Dave's guitar playing. I thought, and I still think he's amazing. But back then, pre-internet, information was harder to come by. And although back then a few articles would say, about the tragedy that he endured, nothing more was known. And now with this documentary, boy, I mean, you hear people, just saying how amazing it is and how incredible it is. And it really, really is. Definitely check it out. Morning Sun is available on demand. And check out the interview if you haven't. It's really cool. So we're going to go out with a little bit of Jane's Addiction. This is one of my all-time favorite songs. It's so freaking cool and just rock and roll and everything you want in a track. So West of the Rockies coming right back in just a few minutes. Enjoy this one. Here we go.
Open your mind.
And we are back to the second hour West of the Rockies. I'm Frank. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know it's late, but boy, we're having some spooky fun here, to say the least. As always, I'm Engineer Frank on Twitter, West of the Rockies on Facebook. Check out the show on Twitter at WOTR Radio. And of course, the website, WOTRradio.com. Don't forget to give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/West of the Rockies. And as always, I'm joined by Genevieve, who you can find her on Twitter at Genevieve Uway. If you don't know how to spell it, just go to the website. You'll find it there, WOTRradio.com. As always, thank you guys for subscribing, tuning in. We always appreciate it. It's what keeps us going here, to say the least. And yeah, it's always a good hang with everyone. Our guest tonight, as you probably know by now, is Mario Becerra, who is the author of this really, really spooky book called Haunted East Los Angeles. And I had a great time reading it, and I highly encourage people to get it. Mario, where can people get a copy of your book?
They can just go to Amazon, type in Haunted East Los Angeles, and it'll pop up. And apparently there are a lot of used copies now that they can get on sale, so I encourage everyone to get the used copies because they're cheaper. So just go to Amazon.
I like that. Just keeping it real.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe there's also a Spanish version of this, correct?
Absolutely. It's called El Este de Los Ángeles Embrujado, but we're still working out the kinks, but it's in the works and it's coming very soon. So stay tuned for that.
So for our Spanish-speaking friends, or maybe if you had a friend that, or some family maybe not proficient in English, but you want them to be scared just like I was reading this stuff, you can pick up that Spanish copy from them. Now, we are also being joined by none other than Mr. Ernie Alonso of Haunted Orange County. Good sir, how are you? How's it going? And I know you just got back from Utah, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I was out there for a week. Our good friend Ben Hansen of Sci-Fi's Factor Faked and a bunch of other paranormal programming.
Mm-hmm.
His family actually started a convention out there. Last year was the first year. It's called PrepperCon. And it has anything and everything to do with disaster preparedness. And they had over 260 vendors, I believe.
Wow.
It was pretty huge. It was actually the hugest prepper convention in the country.
Wow.
So, they had a huge turnout and just a lot of great products. They had over 80 classes that were going on,
really?
Seminars, a lot of cool stuff. But I'm glad I went and got to help them out with that. It was a great experience.
So people can be ready when stuff hits the fan, right? That's what the event is about, right? Yeah, right? Which honestly, I mean, I don't know if people have been keeping up with all these earthquakes happening lately. I think
I think
I should have gone to PrepperCon myself.
Yeah, it scares me more.
Yeah, they were talking about that, and then I guess there was a couple of tornadoes in Oklahoma and some of that stuff on the Pacific Rim.
It's just advertising.
Yeah. Tell Ben to stop manipulating the weather to serve his evil purpose. No, I'm kidding. No, we love Ben. Check out the interview with Ben Hansen, also on WTRradio.com. You see, I take every opportunity to plug an interview whenever possible. But Ernie, we're not here just to shoot the breeze, because there's some exciting stuff in the works, if I'm understanding correctly, here between yourself and Haunted Orange County and Mario Becerra and the stuff happening in East Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, me and Mario have been getting together pretty regularly, and we are working on a East Los Angeles bus tour, which will be a first for Haunted Orange County, and will be our first out of Orange County tour that we'll be doing, which we're really excited about. Mario has been just a great guy to work with. He really knows his stuff. He's got things in the works over there for us already, and we're really looking forward to putting it together. He's got all the stories, doing a little bit of extra research to get some more details on some of the stories. But I'm really looking forward to being able to go into East LA and on a bus, this time, which will be very cool.
That's exciting stuff. And I had the pleasure of going with what would you call it? Like location scouting, if you will, along with Mario the other time. And we got to check out all the spots that he covers in the book. Do you have a personal favorite that you are excited to take people to?
Well, I like the cemetery only because to do a ghost walk and actually get to go into the cemetery, cemeteries are usually closed, gates are closed by, sunset, and you can't really get in there. So one of the advantages to be able to do this tour during the daytime is that we're going to be able to actually get into some of these locations where we otherwise couldn't in the evening. So I think being able to go into the cemetery and kind of standing in the same areas where some of these people experience some of these things,
they saw the goat
is going to be
elf.
Great. I'm sorry?
Where they saw the goat elf?
The goat elf.
Yeah, that, believe me, that's the one that got me, I'll tell you.
But yeah, so so that's a cool spot. I mean, I always love Linda Vista because I got to go there a couple of times, probably not as many times as you got to go. But, as you know, when we were there, that place looks amazing now. It's just like completely restored.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a 1920s type building, and even a little bit that I got to see when they opened up the door, it's just completely restored.
Oh, yeah.
and
well, now it's called what, the Hollenbeck residential something?
Definitely not as freaky anymore.
Yeah. But, I don't know if it's true, but word on the street is that during the first week or so of, like, the first families that moved in, apparently a couple of families left in the middle of the night.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can just Google it. There's definitely a few
there's some
stories floating around.
Yeah, because, I mean, everybody, including myself, when we heard of the plans of turning Linda Vista into, like, the housing for the elderly,
Didn't
I was
sound
like,
like a good
that
idea.
is not the place you want to put people in. And, like I said, every now and then you hear some scary stories, and when we were there, we tried to talk to people or see if we can walk in, but obviously now they're private residences, and obviously the public can't just walk in there. So
you can obviously tell that they're trying to really steer away from that and and have a fresh start. But
we'll see if the ghosts will let them.
I know, right? No, I'd like to be able to speak to a security guard or somebody that works there on a regular basis that is there at different hours and find out if them or anybody else has experienced anything interesting.
Yeah, so if you're a security guard from that place and you're listening to this, hit up Ernie. He wants to hear all about it. And honestly, so do I.
Yeah.
Hit me up too while you're at it. Ernie, but where can people keep up and see, what the latest developments are with Haunted OC and this upcoming tour of Haunted East Los Angeles? Where can people go?
They can go to hauntedoc.com. They can go to Instagram at Haunted Orange County or Twitter at Haunted Orange. We are also working on a tour of Hollywood, and Chad is hosting a podcast that he just started. I think it's only once a month, and it's called Haunted Hollywood. And it's kind of focusing on some of the stories, and he's been living in Hollywood for the past few years now. And Hollywood's got a lot of great stories, and I know Mario. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, or kind of giving too much away. But Mario's working on a little something.
Yes, no, go for it.
Oh, okay.
No, you go for
Mario's
it.
working. Yeah, Mario's working on on a book having to do with a lot of the great stories in old Hollywood, which is going to be awesome. I've always been super interested in that, and it's going to be a great read. And so Chad's doing this podcast called Haunted Hollywood, and we are going to be launching a tour. And I told him, he really wants to get it up and running for the summertime. Yeah. But it would be called Chad Lindbergh's Haunted Hollywood, and it would be a bus tour where he would actually be the tour guide, and we would incorporate some ghost hanging in it. That's something that we have in the works as well.
And before I let you go, Ernie, I want you to tell us, because there's another cool event coming up fairly soon here, and that is an event with none other than Travis Walton, who we've had the pleasure to speak to on this show as well, and everybody's probably familiar with the movie Fire in the Sky and all that. I know that you're planning an event also with Travis. Can you tell people a little bit about what that is all about?
Yeah. Thursday night, we're bringing him out here to the OC, and he's going to be doing a presentation in downtown Santa Ana, and he's going to be basically recounting his story that the movie Fire in the Sky was based on. And, for those of you who don't know, he was abducted in 1975, and it's been the best documented case of an abduction because of all the eyewitnesses, the multiple polygraphs that were taken and passed over the years. And it's coming up this Thursday. We still have tickets on the website, hauntedoc.com.
Oh, I bet it's going to be out of this world, isn't it?
It's going to be out of this world, definitely.
Thank you, folks. I'm here all week. Ernie, thank you so much for all the updates. It's definitely a lot of exciting stuff happening over there at Haunted Orange County. Definitely encourage people to check it out. Check out some of the tours. Some of the Orange County tours are really, really interesting and really, really informative. Thank you so much, Ernie.
Yes. Frank, if I can say something about Ernie's tours before he leaves, is that okay?
Yeah.
Ernie, when I first met him, he what's up, Ernie? He invited me to the Haunted Orange tour. He said, hey, come on down so you can see, what Haunted OC is about. So I said, yeah, go for it. So I went down, and I got to tell everyone, the tour is so professional, so well planned, so well researched that they have it covered. And you're there, and you just enjoy yourself. And the whole time you're walking around with your mouth half open because the stories are so good. The logistics are so well planned that you can't help but enjoy yourself. I mean, it is one of the best events I've ever been to with regard to the paranormal, because Ernie, he's a planner. Planning Haunted East LA. He said, let's do a tour, and I said, all right, go for it. Let's start next week. And he's like, no, we got about 6 months of planning here.
Well, I've said this before, and I know I'm not the only one, because people can honestly just go to their Facebook page and read the reviews. The Haunted Orange County has a reputation for being one of the most professional event companies, that's for sure. And I've been on several tours, and let me tell you, nothing has yet topped a Haunted Orange County event, whether it's a tour, event, or otherwise, or even if it's just one of Ernie's parties. Believe me, they're still amazing as well.
Great. Well, thank you guys. The checks are in the mail.
Thank you. Yeah. Ernie, because rent a zoo. Ernie Alonso, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Ernie.
Guys. Awesome.
And
Ernie.
Take it easy.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
All right. That was Ernie Alonso from Haunted Orange County, a great friend of ours and a great guy. And honestly, as you can tell, we always have a lot of fun talking to Ernie about all things paranormal and not so paranormal. Mario, why don't we head back into this book, because there's one more story I want to talk about, and then I want to do our top 5 with you. And in your case, we're going to do the top 5 historical hauntings, if you will. And I can't wait to hear you talk about them. But there is one story in this book. Well, not story, but one location that you cover in this book that I must say, there is something about this that really got to me. And the chapter of it's The Haunted House on Hubbard Street. and the subtitle is Stalking the Night. That particular chapter deals with Richard Ramirez, and Richard Ramirez was apprehended in this street in East Los Angeles, but I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about this particular section of town and what happened there and why did you include it in your book.
Well, Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, and I'm sure you guys can hear my tone of voice kind of drop a little bit, because it's a really dark subject, and I in no way, glorify this man because he was a monster, and like the person that I interviewed, he was a demon, and the man, in my opinion, was the embodiment of evil. But for those of you that don't know, and if you don't know him, you must be 18 or 19 because, most people know who he is. Yeah. This man in the early 80s or mid-80s, he terrorized Southern California. He used to break into people's homes. He'd rape, he'd murder, and his method of committing these horrendous acts was he would break into a home and he would immediately execute the man and then have his way with the woman, and then execute her as well sometimes. But in some cases, he used to use the victim's blood to draw pentagrams on the wall, which would, signaling the adherence to Satan, which was, it's such a dark topic that it's hard for me to talk about. But the family that they caught him on Hubbard Street in East LA. He had left a thumbprint behind a rearview mirror, and the police had linked that thumbprint to a guy who had stolen the car. So his picture was all over the newspaper, and he came back from Texas because he was in Texas, and he was walking down Hubbard Street, and everyone started yelling, "Hey, ahí va el matón! There goes the killer!" Wow! So they start chasing him, and he tries to carjack this woman. Well, her husband is putting in fence posts right in front of their house. So what does the husband do? He takes one of these fence posts and he runs up to him and he starts beating him in the head. Pretty soon his sons come out. They start beating him in the head too. And if it wasn't for the police getting there, they would have killed him. I'm convinced my people in East LA would have just bludgeoned this man to death. Right. So the police saved his life. Interesting thing about that day is I lived on Princeton Street, which was one block over. And I was actually there the day they caught him. My mom and my grandfather came out and they said, they caught Richard Ramirez, so the Night Stalker. So there we go. And I saw him in the cop car, and he was already bandaged with a white bandage, and everyone was lining up to see him. And they took him, to the Hollenbeck station, and that night, everyone, they had a big, I don't know if it was that night exactly, but they had a big party on Hubbard Street. And I remember the sheriffs and everyone showed up and everyone just, I don't remember personally because I was a little boy, but, they tell me everyone partied and because they had caught this monster. They needed to get him off the street because he was just such a horrendous piece of humanity that, I'm happy that they dealt with him and they put him away.
This guy was just bad news. I mean, definitely to call him the embodiment of evil is almost an understatement when you read about this guy. But tell me a little bit about this particular account that you include in your book about somebody that, like yourself, got a glimpse of Richard Ramirez when he was apprehended. And apparently things spiraled out of control pretty much immediately.
Right. Well, the family we interviewed, the gentleman we interviewed, he was there the day they caught him, and he saw him, this gentleman that we call Miguel, it's not his real name, but he saw him, and he immediately, there was a fascination with him. I mean, if you saw him in the courtroom, we'd watch TV, and you see him in the courtroom, and he'd flash the pentagram on, that was carved into his hand or inked into his hand. And, as a Catholic boy growing up, you're like, wow, that's scary. But this guy, Miguel, he saw him that day. And he, they say that in order for your home to become haunted or for your place to become, whatever, possessed or whatever you want to call it, you have to invite it into your home. So this guy, he kind of invited into his home because he became fascinated with Satan and with evil after encountering Richard Ramirez, because he says that was the embodiment of evil. Right. So that very same night that they caught him, that family started hearing noises, started smelling things. They started hearing these voices all over the house. And the dad kept trying to find out what the heck is going on. They thought, well, maybe there's a radio on or something, or maybe the neighbors have the radio on. But as much as he searched, there was nothing going on, and they couldn't find the source of those voices. And slowly it escalated. And they brought in the local Catholic priest from the church, Our Lady of Lourdes. And when the priest would come in and bless it, everything would be calm. But as soon as the priest left, family pictures would fall off the mantle. And, the house would start to stink horrendously. Just disgusting smells coming from the walls, to the point where the family was, we got to go. We got to go stay with my sister, the mother would say. And I don't want to give away the whole story, but, it had a lot to do with this young man's fascination with Richard Ramirez and his eventual fascination with Satanism. Right. And the Satanism, in conjunction with the Catholicism of the parents trying to fight out the evil, because all these evil things are happening in their house. And in the meantime, the son is in the back, playing the Ouija board and praying to the devil. So what happens to a home when both of those opposing forces are in the home? Can you imagine that in your house? I mean, the house became, I don't know what you call it, but just spiritual chaos in there.
Yeah, it's almost like a cautionary tale of sorts, because I believe, and I'm not trying to sway anybody in any particular belief system or faith or religion or what have you, but it's not the first time that I hear this type of story that, somebody becomes infatuated with darkness. And, I enjoy rock and roll and heavy metal and goth music and stuff like that. But, I guess you kind of got to know where to draw the line, because, there are certain things out there that we don't understand that you want to be careful of. At least that's my opinion when people ask me, I want to get into, paranormal investigating, or I want to go check out this place. Like, well, do some homework first and, make sure that it's your cup of tea. Right. Because, you never know. And definitely I want people to grab a copy of the book and read that story, because honestly, it was really heavy. That was probably one of the heaviest stories in the book, and that's why I kind of want to save it for the end. We're almost wrapping up. It's some very, very scary, and like I said, a cautionary tale of sorts that I think people should read and kind of make up their own opinion on as to what could have happened there. But Mario, before we let you go, as always, we do this thing called the top 5. And in your case, as I mentioned earlier, you picked your top 5 historic haunted places. And you sent me the list. It's a really interesting list. I can't wait to hear why you picked these places. Why don't we work our way down the countdown? Boy, that was redundant. But let's start with number 5, which is the Queen Mary.
Well, the Queen Mary, it's here in Long Beach. And, I like haunted locations that have a history to them. And the first thing that strikes me about the Queen Mary is that, Adolf Hitler during World War II wanted to sink it. And they actually had a big reward. If you sank the Queen Mary, I'd give you, Deutschmarks or whatever the hell they call their currency. But the Queen Mary, very haunted. They call it the Gray Ghost. And there was an incident with a boat called the Curacao, where the Queen Mary was, it was going across the Atlantic, and it hit this boat called the Curacao, and a lot of sailors perished in it. And people go and they visit the front of the ship. I don't know my maritime terminology, but whatever the front of the ship is called. Right. And they can hear these sailors crying out for help, and they can hear water, getting into the Queen Mary, and there are a lot of great stories about the swimming pool, and there's a story that there's an actual vortex there that'll take you into another dimension.
Yeah.
So, that was one of my favorite choices because it's close by, and also it's very fascinating. And I've been there a few times, so that was number 5.
Nice. Number 4, we got Little Bighorn Battlefield.
Oh, yeah. My wife is from the Black Hills of South Dakota. So we went out there a couple of years ago, and on the way back, she has an aunt in Montana, in Bozeman, Montana. So we stopped at the Battle of Little Bighorn, famously known as Custer's Last Stand.
Right.
And when we got there, I immediately felt something's wrong in this place. And my wife, she's not a superstitious person. She doesn't believe in any of this. So, we were walking around, and she stops me, and she says, "Hey, do you feel something's off here?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable here." So for my wife to tell me that, I knew something was going on there. And of course, I researched it. It was where Custer fought the Lakota and the Cheyenne Indians. And people say they see Indian warriors on the bluffs. And, Indian ghosts dressed for battle. And strange balls of light. And if you go there, you will know what I'm talking about, because it's just, there's a feeling to that place that it just stays with you.
Yeah, it's something that, I wasn't too familiar with this particular location as far as being a haunted place. But yeah, I mean, doing a quick Google search, it does seem like people have experienced some weird things there. Let's go to number 3, and I've actually had the pleasure of visiting this place, the Tower of London.
Oh, wow. Well, the nickname is the Bloody Tower.
Yeah.
So, words like torture, execution, murder, suicide, grief, they see headless figures, and then gusts of wind when the windows are closed, and you feel gusts of wind. And, again, going back to history, Henry VIII. And, this is where he executed, a lot of the people. Anne Boleyn, his second wife, he killed her there because he wanted to marry Jane Seymour. And the Catholic Church, the Pope, wouldn't give him the divorce. So he said, well, let's just behead her in the Tower of London. And, when you think of someone like Anne Boleyn, who, she rose to prominence and power next to Henry VIII to then get tossed away and then executed, beheaded. I'm not sure she got beheaded, but she got killed in the Tower of London. Mm-hmm. The energy that has to be in the Tower of London, it's just got to be so thick. And they talk about these talking heads. They just see heads rambling on endlessly, which, would lend itself to the notion that all the people that got beheaded there, you have heads, they just pop up and they start rambling. It's just such a great historic place. And also Richard III, and, it's just such a great place to, not just the hauntings, but the history behind it.
Yeah.
It's a great place to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely, England is not short on history, to say the least. Some more pleasant than others. Let's go to number 2, and let's bring it back to the U.S. This was part of the original colonies, this area. Lincoln's Ghost at the White House.
Absolutely. Lincoln, he's been known, people see him pacing back and forth in the hallways. And when you think about...
Is he murmuring like, this is not what I imagined back then? This is not exactly what I had in mind.
He's saying some pretty strong words and nodding his head, saying, oh geez. But can you imagine the torment that man went through when he was, through the Civil War, sending these young men out to die, and the responsibility of that. It's no wonder he's wandering the halls, because that energy, it has to stay there. So a lot of people have seen him wandering the corridors of the White House, and one of the most famous incidents is Winston Churchill, during World War II, was staying in the Lincoln bedroom, and after a bath, because Churchill liked to drink his scotch and smoke his cigars. After a bath, he walks out of the bath and he sees Lincoln's ghost standing there by the fireplace, and he famously says, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have you seem to have me at a disadvantage because, of course, Churchill was naked. So,
oh wow,
I love that story because Winston Churchill. It doesn't get better than that, and Lincoln.
Two very iconic historical figures, to say the least. I've heard stories about the Lincoln's ghost, and I guess I've always been a bit skeptical, but I never heard of the story involving Churchill. So, hey, maybe I should reconsider my whole stance on whether the White House is haunted. I know that. I was gonna make a Clinton joke, but I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna stop myself right there, and let's go to number one, which is the Bell Witch. What is the Bell Witch? I don't think I know that one.
It's a 19th century poltergeist. It's a tale from Tennessee, from the early 19th century. It was a guy named John Bell, and he, they dealt, it's the South. So they deal in slavery, and it was part of a business deal gone bad. And this woman who they called Kate, the poltergeist Kate, she'd come in and she'd torment John Bell's family. And as a family man, the worst thing in this world is someone messing with your family. You would do anything to just stop that.
Yeah.
So the idea that this invisible entity was, especially tormenting his young daughter, Elizabeth Bell. She was getting scratched and bruised, and famously Andrew Jackson went to go find out what was going on behalf of John Bell, and Andrew Jackson was not the kind of man you would mess with. And they say that when Andrew Jackson left, the Bell Witch, Kate wouldn't let him go, so the wheels on his wagon, she made him get stuck so that he couldn't leave, and until she decided, okay, now you leave, then finally he left. And I don't know if this is true, but he said that he would rather deal with the British than deal with the Bell Witch again.
Wow.
So it's a great story. And when John Bell died, the Bell Witch showed up and she mocked him at his funeral in front of his family, so the story goes. So not only in life, but in death, this poltergeist went out and made sure that this man and his family suffered. And it's a great story. People should look it up.
She went from being the Bell Witch to being the Bell... Anyways, we're keeping it PG. Wow. No, honestly, that's a very fascinating story. And these are, honestly, I'm really happy that you picked these five, because some of these, like I said, I wasn't too familiar with. Yeah. And the ones that I was slightly familiar with, I realized that there's a whole lot more to these cases that you picked. So those were really great historical haunted places that you share with us. And I guess that is kind of your MO, if I may use the term. You like finding these places. They have some kind of something to just make the account a little bit more solid. When we were talking with Ernie, he mentioned that you're working on another book. Tell me a little bit about that, and when are you hoping to have that book out?
Well, I'm working on Haunted Los Angeles. And the first location I want to have that out by October. It's just nice. The research that goes into it is just so extensive.
Of course.
And the first location we are featuring is a Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Nice. And I've already been there, and I've sat there, and I've heard, there are stories that you can find on the internet, but, you actually have to go to the places and sit there and listen. So the bartender, I sat there and I listened to all his stories, and they were these great stories that you just cannot find on the internet, because these folks have worked there, and they these stories of rooms where the cleaning lady walks in and there's a corpse hanging and there's blood on the bed, and she runs out screaming, and then security comes, of course, because they think someone's dead, and then security shows up and no one's there.
Wow.
And then on the walkie-talkies at base, the people at the base, they hear voices on the walkie-talkie that the people in the room don't hear. Wonderful stories. I want to work on Haunted Los Angeles, and I also want it to be more representative of, not only Los Angeles as a city, but to celebrate its ethnic diversity. So I want to go to, South Central. Well, they don't call it South Central anymore. They call it South LA, but I grew up with South Central.
That's how I knew it,
to Chinatown. I just wanted to be representative of the whole city, because these things that we experience, these paranormal activities that people, that's what they call them. Yeah. They're universal. They're not specific to a culture or an ethnicity or a race. They're universal, and they've been experienced by people since the beginning of the human race. So I want that to come across in haunted Los Angeles. So I'm looking for stories to tell. So if you know anybody who has a story, I'm happy to listen to them.
I think I can contribute at least for 2 chapters.
All right.
So, but it's funny when you mention about this being like a kind of like a universal phenomenon. Because we just got back from a trip to Malaysia, which it's in Asia, and it's a Muslim country. The government is Muslim, and the main religion is Islam. And it's funny because even there, people, we would talk to people and we would tell them like, hey, we do this show and we talk about these kind of topics. And it's interesting because there was one lady in particular who shared with us not just her story, but photographs and video of some really, really spooky stuff that, I've seen here in the U.S., on more than one occasion. And for me, it was really scary yet fascinating how this type of occurrences, literally happen. It looks like everywhere in the world, This place is literally, clear across the other side of the Pacific. And I'm watching, this video of something that I can't explain, and it's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to be an amazing book that you're putting together, because obviously LA itself is just such a diverse city. And I remember when we got a chance to talk to you as you were taking us through the locations, you were talking to us about the cemetery and the neighborhood, and you were telling us that at one point there were a large number of members of the Jewish community, and before the Mexican American community became more predominant, and obviously that there was a large number of Chinese American population as well. And that's just in this small area of Los Angeles. So of course, when you expand outside of just like East LA, I'm sure you will have your work cut out for you, because the amount of stories that I think you will find is going to be quite overwhelming. But I look forward to see what you put together, and definitely want people to keep up with that. Speaking of keeping up, where can people go to find out more about the upcoming book, and maybe get a sneak peek at the one that's out now and all that good stuff?
Well, for now, all I have is a Haunted East Los Angeles Facebook page. So you can go on there, and my updates are going to be posted there right now, because that's all I have. But I'm going to be building a website soon, an author's website, and so you'll be able to go there and see what we're up to and what we're doing and the stories that we're coming out with, so that not only you can find out what we're doing, but also maybe you might be a contributor to what we're trying to do. So for right now, though, Haunted East Los Angeles Facebook, just type that in and you'll find us there.
Very cool. And the book is available on Amazon, and you can get the English version, and the Spanish version is still available like in Kindle format, I believe, correct?
Yes, it's still available in Kindle format, but if you find an accent out of place, don't get mad at me and don't ask me for a refund, because it's only $4.99, so you can't go bad. You can't go wrong.
No, absolutely not. And obviously the English version, that is still available as a hard copy as well as a Kindle. Okay, cool. So people can take their pick, whichever they prefer. Mario, what can I say? It's been a lot of fun. The book is Haunted East Los Angeles by Mario Becerra and Victor Huesca. Definitely encourage people to check it out. I had again, I don't know if fun is the word I want to use, but I definitely definitely had a good time reading this book and reading about all the these paranormal experiences that people have been experiencing literally just a couple of miles away from here. It's kind of crazy that the kind of stuff that goes on and you never hear about until somebody like Mario goes through all the trouble of putting these stories together, and it's well researched. And as Mario has said, these are the stories that are pretty solid.
Yeah, and before you guys go, Frank and Genevieve, I want to say, and I know this is going to come totally off of left field, but Jane's Addiction is one of the greatest bands that has ever existed. I can't believe you guys are playing Jane's Addiction during this interview because I've been such a fan of that band since I was 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Perry Farrell, Dave Navarro, Stephen Perkins, Eric Avery.
Yeah.
Just one of the greatest bands that has ever graced my ears. So you guys doing that thing with Dave Navarro, and I know I heard about what he went through with the tragedy that he suffered, but what an amazing band. And I don't care what anybody says, Jane's Addiction is one of the greatest bands that has ever existed. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, no problem. And,
just for you, of course. We planned that.
Fun fact,
right.
I actually took Dave to Linda Vista once because he wanted to check it out. Yeah, I don't think a whole lot happened, really, but hey, it was interesting. That place is definitely was definitely vibey. But if people go, I have a Tumblr page somewhere where you see a little. If you look closely, you can see him there.
Right.
But anyways, Mario, thank you so much for taking the time for being with us. Like I said, it's been a lot of fun, and your book it's incredible. And like I said, we're gonna be keeping up with you and looking forward to the next installment of your book series
and
for sure.
And the tour.
All right.
And the tour, definitely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you and being on. And I know we'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Frank, Genevieve, thank you so much for this time. I don't know if fun is the word we want to use because Frank seems, but thank you folks so much. You guys are great, and everyone listen to their other interviews because they're really good. I listened to a bunch of them, and they were so good. These guys, they're great interviewers. So listen to their shows.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Take it
you guys
easy.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
That was Mario Becerra, author of Hauntings Los Angeles. Again, go get this book. Honestly, it's only a few bucks, and it's a good investment for your paranormal scary story library. Believe me, this is the kind of stuff.
For the new one.
Yeah, you actually did a little Periscope reading a couple of weeks back, or a few weeks back, and people were enjoying it. Yeah. You were reading the short little snippets. We realized that people dug it, and as we encourage people on that Periscope, and we encourage people
Definitely
now,
not bedtime
go pick
reading.
it. Yeah, it's not bedtime reading. But definitely pick up a copy because it's really fascinating. I mean, I love all this stuff. That being said, Genevieve, it's been a pleasure as always. It's good to be back. I don't know about you, but I missed doing this show. We were going for 3 weeks, and
it feels like a long time.
Yeah, so I'm glad we had a great guest to kick things off again.
Oh, definitely.
And of course, a big shout out to Ernie Alonso. Check out Haunted Orange County and be on the lookout for those tours. Be on the lookout for the next book. As always, I'm Engineer Frank on Twitter, West of the Rockies on Facebook. Don't forget to follow our show on Twitter at WOTR Radio. Check out the website, WOTRradio.com. If you miss any part of this interview, it'll be posted there and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/WOTR Radio. As always, Genevieve Uway on Twitter. Boy, I've had a blast. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get any sleep tonight after all this, but it's been a good hang.
Stories.
Yeah, but not from this book though, because that'll just lead to some bad nightmares. That's how you know it's a good scary book.
I was going to say
that's actually an endorsement to the book, I should say. And that being said, take care, be safe, God bless. Don't do anything too crazy. Want to see you back next week. We're gonna go out with a little bit of I love this song. Honestly, Metallica. Everybody says that after the Black Album, things kind of got a little sketchy. But you know what? Load, even though I wasn't a fan when it came out, a few years later, I popped it back into my CD player, and I was like, you know what? It wasn't too bad. And this track was definitely my favorite track. Metallica, King Nothing. We'll see you guys next week. Till then, au revoir.
Good night.
West of the Rockies with Frank the Engineer on the Independent FM, Los Angeles.